So as humans, we spend a lot of time developing our identities. We spend a lot of time adding on to our identities, whether it's moving to a certain neighborhood, whether it's buying a certain car, buying a new pair of fancy leather pants for your TEDx talk that you're about to do. We spend a lot of time adding on to develop who we are and what we mean to ourselves. Well, I'm here to tell you today that the one part of your identity that, with the exception of marriage, you can't really add on to is your name. Now, none of us got to choose our own names, with a very few exceptions. My name is Amelia Earhart. We have slides that go along with this. We'll get to these in just a minute. My name being Amelia Earhart is something that I have had to deal with for 30 years now. Every single day of my life, I am asked, what's the story behind your name? Are you a pilot? Are you related to Amelia Earhart? Well, the moral of the story is that the girl that you see here in this picture knows exactly who she is, but it's only because her name was taken away from her 6 weeks ago, at the most pivotal part of her life, when she told in front of the entire world on the Today Show that she was going to fly around that very same world in a Pilatus PC-12. We'll get more to the flight in just a minute. But first, let's go back to my childhood. Now, I use these clickers every day on 9 News, and I can't seem to figure this one out. So when I was born in 1983, I was born to parents Debbie and Glenn, two very humble, simple individuals, just met, fell in love in Southern California, had a child. And when they had me, they had the last name Earhart. On my dad's side of the family, Earhart was the story. The family name was that somehow, very distantly, we were related to Amelia Earhart. So my mom got this crazy idea. There's my mom and I right there, laying on the floor of my grandma's house. She said, we want to give her a name that no one will ever forget. Let's name her Amelia Earhart. It's a great legacy. We should have a great female role model. It never necessarily meant anything to my parents other than, let's give her a strong name that everyone will have a reason to ask her about. And it turned out to be one of those things that I think on down the line my parents may have regretted a little bit, but it's only been in the last few months that that's come to happen. There's a picture of my dad and I coming up here. My dad, real simple guy, just really hard worker. He's actually a Buddhist cowboy now, of all things. He lives in Pagosa Springs, and we talk about my name a lot. My mom and I do as well, but it's kind of coming from a different place recently. Now in June and July of this year, I went to Oshkosh, Wisconsin for, of course, EAA's AirVenture event. Big, huge airplane celebration. I'm sure you guys know all about it. About 16,000 airplanes fly in. So I figured it was a great place to announce to the world that after being a pilot for about 10 years, it was time to do something bigger. I wanted to fly around the world in honor of Amelia Earhart because for 30 years, we had been told through my family's history that somehow we were related to Amelia. Now, on through the years, childhood, that little girl who grew up in the middle of the desert, just kind of playing in grandma's yard, building forts, real simple life. You don't look at that little girl and think Amelia Earhart, she's going to do anything special with that name. But that's a big burden to put on a child. When you don't get to choose your name, you're forced to identify it in the best way that you know how. So for the first 18 years of my life, I kind of avoided it. I went by the name Amy because it was short for Amelia. According to my mom, when she was a little girl, she would name all of her baby dolls Amy. Simple enough. She married into the family Earhart. Amy was a nice short name for Amelia, so they went for it. And for those 18 years, I really struggled with figuring out who I wanted to be in terms of that name. And it took until I was about 17 and I joined the debate team in high school in Tonganoxie, Kansas, after moving all over the country with my parents after they got a divorce. Started to figure out that it was kind of cool to have this name. It was a really nice way to start conversations, and it was doing exactly what my parents thought that it would do. It would spark questions. It would invite me into conversations in unique situations that I would probably never be invited to otherwise. So when it came to my name and I joined the debate team, I had an opportunity to stand up in front of adults and total strangers and say, my name is Amelia Earhart. And people started saying to me, are you a pilot? Are you related? And to the first question, the answer was no, but someday I wanted to be. To the second question, are you related? The answer was always simply, somehow we are distantly related to Amelia Earhart. That's what my grandma told me. That's what her grandma told her. But when it came to being about 18, 19, 20 years old, and I started going to school, going to college, and went to KU and then CSU and then eventually CU Boulder, I got asked the question in so many direct and so many uncomfortable ways that I decided it was time to hire a genealogist and find out exactly how we were related to Amelia Earhart. It was simple enough, so I got online, Googled genealogist in Boulder, and I found a woman who said that she could track my family history. And when she did that, she basically went back a couple generations. She went back to the 1700s and said, well, for the amount of money that you were able to pay me, I can tell you that yes, you are distantly related to Amelia. We can trace it back to the 1700s, and essentially you're a distant relative of hers, somehow distant cousins. But if you want to find exactly how you're related to Amelia, it's going to cost a lot more. We're going to have to go into those international records. And as a college student, who I'm sure a lot of you in this room can relate to, paying for your own college education, really, really tough. And so to pay for a genealogist when it was the option of buying things like fancy leather pants or paying for a genealogist, somehow the choice was a little bit easier to go with the simpler option. So I opted just to go with a distant common ancestry traced back to the 1700s in my relation to Amelia. And that was fine. I started flying. I started taking flight lessons in Boulder, and it was a magical thing. I mean, for those of you who have flown in small airplanes before, you get what that's like. The first time you lift off the ground, you understand exactly where you're supposed to be. And for me, that was the cockpit of a Cessna 172. So that's what I started my flight training in, and it was awesome. It was just like what Jeff said, you know, you get to have these conversations with people when they say, well, what do you do? And you say, oh, I'm a pilot. And people go, oh my gosh, you're a pilot? And they get kind of nervous and excited, and you get a confidence boost out of it. And then people would say, well, what's your name? Well, my name's Amelia Earhart, and that would make people light up even more. So on go the years. I ended up getting a job at 850 KOA doing traffic reporting and news in the middle of the night. It was the least glamorous thing I could possibly ever do. I would drive from Boulder all the way to the tech center, probably at 2, 3 in the morning, get there for the morning show. I would do radio, and then I would drive back to Boulder and go to school all day. But then traffic reverses in the afternoon, so then I would drive from Boulder to the tech center and do the same thing in the afternoon. And this happened 5 days a week. It was a terrible commute, but it was so much fun to have a real job. I had a big girl job in college, and all my friends thought that that was fantastic because I was working in a helicopter, and my name was Amelia Earhart, and I was somehow distantly related. So it was all this perfect storm of nice, happy girl, going through life, going through college. I wanted to be a teacher at the time. Well, everything progressed really nicely, kept working, got a job at Channel 9, and everything really worked out nicely there too. I was in the helicopter, and I was the girl who had the beautiful sunset, sunrise behind her head and the ponytail flipping around, and I was just happy to be up there. And it was really a nice place for me to be. This is what I get to do. People doll me up, and I stand in front of a taped up piece of yellow cardboard, and they make fancy commercials where I say things like, what's your drive going to be like? If you listen to 9 News, you've heard that a million times, and I'm sorry. I think they're going to rotate it out soon. But the point is, the job, the school career, the friendships, the flight lessons, everything was going so well. So on go the years, and I decided to make a couple flights. Now, I made a flight across the US in a Cirrus SR-22 to recreate Amelia Earhart's transcontinental flight. It was from Oakland, California to Miami. We went through Burbank, we went through Austin, we went through Louisiana, and then we eventually made it down to Miami. And that was Amelia Earhart's last flight across the US. It was the first portion of her mission on her uncompleted flight around the world in 1937. So I thought, that'd be a great way to wrap up my instrument training, or at least build the hours there. So I jumped in the plane that was donated to me. I had sponsors paying for the fuel, and it was a great mission. And it got a lot of attention. We actually made our way to the cover. I say we, myself and my instructor at the time who came with me. We got onto the cover of Plane and Pilot magazine, which was pretty cool, until the hate mail started rolling in. You would think that people would cheer you on, trying to do a good thing, just going out and having your own adventure. But people weren't too happy about that because they kept questioning, well, how exactly are you related to Amelia Earhart? We understand that that's your name and that's fine, but what's going on here? Who are you? And are you telling us the truth? So I kind of ignored those things because that was really difficult at the time. Did I want to pay thousands of dollars to a genealogist to research my family history when, to me, it was simply the truth? I had already hired the first one, and my family had told me for years that that's just who I was. And when it comes to our identities, like I said, we can build things on, we can add on by neighborhoods and cars and homes and relationships that we build. But when it comes to our names, it's not in our nature to question what that means and who we are. So after that flight was complete, I decided I was going to make some bigger goals. Being a television news person is a really convenient job to have, but my true passion, of course, is aviation, because that's what I love to do. I want to spend time here. I mean, we've all been in situations like this. This was taken on that flight when I flew across the US. That's the wing of the Cirrus as we flew over New Mexico, and it was sunrise, and it was spectacular, and that is what lights me up. And when I'm up in the plane, it doesn't matter that my name is Amelia Earhart. It could be absolutely anything, because it's that sort of emotion and passion that really lights you up and gets you going in the morning and makes you want to do things like that. So when I announced my intention after the first flight across the US to fly all the way around the world, of course people got very upset. And I said, okay, once again, who are you? What is this connection to Amelia Earhart? We've got to know more. Well, it all kind of came to a head about 12 weeks ago, when in my mind, and I will always remember this, essentially my name was just kind of taken away from me at that point. What happened was we went to Oshkosh. Sorry, this gets to me here because I'm still trying to work through all of this. We came out with Pilatus, who's a big sponsor of the World Flight. Wings Over the Rockies Air and Space Museum is also a huge supporter. I've got a lot of individuals in my life who have come out to support, and also a couple other companies as well. And we went to Oshkosh together, and we had a big press conference set up, and we got on stage, and we said, I'm Amelia Earhart. I started a foundation. We put young women through flight school so that they can have the same passion that I do and find out who they are through flight. We're going to fly around the world. We're going to do it in June 2014, 24,000 nautical miles, 14 stops, endless blue skies and beautiful oceans to cross, and that would be the path. And my intentions were completely pure. Well, when you get out there on a national level and then you're asked to go on the Today Show and People magazine is writing articles about you, you'd think that that would be fun, and it's really not. What I'm learning is that when you put yourself out there with your big goals, you better be ready to be criticized, especially when you've got a name as important as Amelia Earhart, because she changed the course of history. And to a lot of us in this room that have aviation ties, she changed the course of what it means to fly, especially as a young woman pilot. So as the news came out, I got attacked on multiple levels. People said, well, how are you related? We've got to find out more. So I said, okay, enough is enough. This is just turning into too much of a terrible situation. We hired a genealogist. We went to Ancestry.com and said, can you help us figure out exactly this connection between Amelia Earhart and myself? And they said, sure. So they got to work on it, and a week went by, and I thought, okay, we're just going to put this to rest. The first genealogist will be proved right. My family will be proved right. And so I finally got the call after. I would call Ancestry.com, and they would say, we're still working on it, we're still working on it. And I'd call them back, and I'd say, hey, Kevin, what have you got for me? And the calls got slower and slower, and Kevin stopped returning my phone calls. And finally, he answered one day, and I said, hey, Kevin, it's Amelia. And I'm a really optimistic person. Any of you who know me know that I am, most of the time, just happy girl. And I could tell that there was something in Kevin's voice that day that was different, because Kevin had been really hopeful too. He wanted to be able to tell me, yes, this is how you're related to Amelia Earhart. And the phone call that ended that day, basically, he said, I'm sorry, Amelia, he said, the first genealogist was wrong. So when you think you're somebody for 30 years, and your whole identity of traffic reporter and pilot and strong young woman who loves flight because her name was Amelia Earhart, when that's taken away from you, that's a part of your identity that you can't really replace by buying something new, moving, finding a new relationship partner. When it's your name, there's something different about it. And so I remember I got the phone call. I was sitting in my garage in my car, and the car was turned off, the garage door was closed, and the car was completely dark in there. It was a really strange moment that it all happened. And so I hung up the phone call, and I'm sitting there, and my posture is like crushed. If I wasn't Amelia Earhart anymore, why was I flying around the world? why would I do this anymore if my name wasn't Amelia Earhart? And I sat there for a good hour in my car at my house, just couldn't call my parents, knew they would be crushed because that was their story. They named their daughter Amelia Earhart because they thought that we were connected to her. And what I've realized through all of this is that I am now more connected to Amelia Earhart by having that name and that identity taken away from me. Because that was a crutch all these 30 years. Being Amelia Earhart meant that I was able to get up in airplanes and do cool stuff like this. But what I realized is that there were other people out there in the world who weren't named Amelia Earhart, young, amazing women that were out there doing similar things, like this young lady, Destiny. This is our first scholarship recipient for the Fly with Amelia Foundation. Her name is not Amelia Earhart, but she wants to fly airplanes. Now, when everybody found out that I wasn't related to Amelia Earhart, I got the nastiest emails sent to me. I was attacked on so many levels. People actually said to me that if Amelia Earhart was alive today, she wouldn't even speak to you. And I call BS on that. Because what I have found out through all of this is that when you realize exactly where you want to be, what you're passionate about, who you are on a daily basis, and you wake up and it's the first thing that you think about, your name could be absolutely anything in the world, and it could change tomorrow, and as long as you still feel the way that you do when you get up in that airplane, and you know that you want to fly around the world and do it for the right reasons to help other people get inspired about their own passionate adventure, it makes absolutely no difference whatsoever. So to all those naysayers that have come out, I want the next slide to come up here. For all those naysayers who came out and criticized me for taking on that identity of Amelia Earhart for 30 years, sure, I'll take it. I read all the tweets. I read all the comments. I responded to a lot of them. That was fun. What I've realized now is that when I was younger, I used to say that the best gift that my parents ever gave me was giving me the name Amelia Earhart because it was a way for me to create an identity. And now I say that the best gift that I've ever received is actually having that name taken away from me because I've now found out who I am, and that is Amelia Rose Earhart. I'm the same type of woman that she was. I'm passionate, I'm adventurous. I like to stir things up a little. I like to cause a little bit of ruckus and wear leather pants. I feel like Amelia would have worn these pants. So next year when I fly around the world, starting out in June 1st, that's when our weather window opens, we are going to fly very close to Amelia's route because we want to see what it was like to be up in an airplane just like she did in 1937, to see the night sky filled with all those stars. Back in the day, she used celestial navigation to know where she was going. And it wasn't a perfect science, but now through the technology and the advancements and the wonderful, amazing airplanes that we have to use today, we're going to make it around the world. And it's my goal to symbolically complete Amelia Earhart's flight for her. I'm not related, and it doesn't matter one little bit. In fact, I think it brought me even closer to her because now I truly understand who I am. And for the second Amelia Earhart to fly around the world under the facade that she was somehow related and that a blood relationship actually mattered to make that flight happen, go all the way around the world, it's just not the case. Because nobody looks at you and hands you a pilot's license and says, oh, you're Amelia Earhart? Here you go. They don't do that. You've got to work hard for it. You've got to put in the effort. You've got to do all of your homework. Just like Jeff said, you've got to put in all of that legwork to get there, and you've got to do the reps, and you've got to do the sets. So that's where I'm at right now. I'm working hard. We are 226 days away from that flight around the world when we lift off in the Pilatus PC-12 from Oakland, California. 14 stops, and I can't wait to go. I hope you'll join me, and I hope that you have your own adventure, no matter what that is, whether it's leaving the house for the first time in a couple of days, or whether it's flying all the way around the world. Whatever you're passionate about, keep going for it. Determine your own identity, no matter what anybody else says. Thank you.